Hello.
Oh my gosh!
It's me, Nikki Makes Videos. I haven't made videos in quite a long time, but I'm making a video now, and yeah, this is a video that I'm making. I'm making this video for a class actually, but also because I want to make it. I'm making this video very late for a class. This video is very overdue. Sorry, Miss G. I originally began to film this video, and the premise was that it would be short reviews for my top 100 albums of all time, and then I got to like 87, and it had already been 6 minutes. So, I'm not going through 100 albums, we're gonna go with 25. I feel like it's still gonna be, a longer video than I'm gonna want to edit.
It is!
But, hopefully it's like under 10 minutes.
It's not!
These reviews are going to be as concise as possible.
But they're also gonna all be off the cuff.
Straight off the dome. And that's not because I was too lazy to write a script.
Stop lying, just start naming albums.
Number 25 is Death Consciousness by Have a Nice Life. This is one of the most sad and bleak and hopeless albums ever made. This is a very overused term in music discussion, especially lo-fi music discussion, but it sounds like it was produced on a toaster. And more or less it was, and it's better for it. This is one of the best albums ever made. That's why I have it on this list. Number 24 is A Crow Looked at Me by Mount Eerie. Okay, it turns out this album is very hard to talk about because I just tried to review it like twice and I couldn't do it. So I'm just gonna say, if you don't know what this album is, it kind of really feels wrong to review it. But if you don't know what this album is, the guy who recorded it, Phil Elverum, his wife passed away, and this album is just like a giant unfurling of grief, and it is all incredibly blunt and personal. It's not really poetic. It's really just him like directly saying how the loss of his wife is affecting him, and it's really hard to listen to, and it's incredibly sad, and the music itself is incredible, and the emotions conveyed and expressed in this album are some of the most unique to listen to, and it's just incredibly harrowing and just incredibly good. And I promise, I swear to God, that is going to be the longest review in this whole video. Number 23, Vespertine by Björk. This is one of the most lush albums ever recorded, if not the most lush album ever recorded. Like, everything on here just sounds perfect and beautiful, and the songwriting is incredible the entire time, and there's just nothing like it. Number 22, Sung Tongs by Animal Collective. This album is so crazy and so childlike and psychedelic in its childlikeness. The melodies and the way they're played, they're incredibly unique, but in their own way, they're very accessible as well, and they all just sound great. It's a great sounding and feeling album. Number 21, we got Bish Bosh by Scott Walker. This album is, I said the last album was crazy. This album is crazy. This is like almost as crazy as you can go with like contemporary music without like literally making like noise music. It's incredibly hard to describe. The songwriting prowess that Scott Walker displays on this album, even with all of its experimentation, is ridiculous. It is crazy, it is off the charts, and he was old as heck when he made this. Amazing album. Number 20 is In Rainbows by Radiohead. This is In Rainbows by Radiohead. That's my whole review. Number 19, we have Mount Eerie by The Microphones. If you don't know who The Microphones and Mount Eerie are, it might be confusing that I said this album is called Mount Eerie, but the other artist was Mount Eerie. It's the same guy. He was The Microphones and now he's Mount Eerie. Anyway, this album's awesome, and it's like a big concept album about like being reincarnated and then dying again. It's a lot more deep than that, but I just listened to the album. It sounds really cool. Number 18 is To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar. The songwriting, I keep bringing up songwriting, but the songwriting and the production on this album are out of this world. The scale and the ambition and the level of love and labor and thought that was put into every lyric and every note played on this album and every line delivery on this album is off the charts. And there's really nothing I can say about this album that hasn't already been said, but it's amazing. Number 17 is Leaves Turn Inside You by Unwound. This is one of the most surreal and autumnal indie rock albums ever made, and the entire thing just sounds amazing and is amazing. Number 16 is Twin Fantasy by Car Seat Headrest. This album used to be number one. For a very long time it was number one. It is no longer number one, but it is still really good, and it still holds a big close place in my heart. And the confessional songwriting on this album basically changed my entire life. Which I don't think I've ever said about an album before, but it actually kind of did. It is To Be Kind by Swans. The best word to describe this album is transcendent. That it's 2 hours long, and there's like a 30-minute song. I'm explaining this if you like haven't heard this album, but if you have heard this album, I sound annoying. If you haven't heard this album, just listen to it, and then if you don't like it, don't talk to me. Number 24 is... Not 24. Number 14 is The Glow Part 2 by The Microphones. Again, this is the last Phil Elverum album, I promise. The analog production on this album is... like, there's nothing you can really listen to that's like it. And Phil Elverum pretty much, I think, did like all of it himself. It's just listen to it. Number 13 is And Then Nothing Turned Itself Inside Out by Yo La Tengo. This is probably the most nocturnal album ever made. It sounds like it's night, and you're thinking about everything. You're thinking about it all, pal. Number 12 is Donuts by Jay Dilla. There's no way I can describe it succinctly, so I'll just say
Donuts is a haunting and hard-hitting album. It's very wonderful sounding, and the production is great. Truly, every human emotion you can think of is expressed on Donuts by Jay Dilla. It is a one-of-a-kind instrumental hip-hop record that everyone should listen to.
Number 11 is Remain in Light by Talking Heads. Again, there's really nothing I could say about this album that hasn't already been said, but this album is so thought-provoking and groovy, but it's also so fun to listen to, and every song is like perfect. And I love Talking Heads. I love Talking Heads. Number 10 is White Pony by Deftones. This is my favorite metal album ever made. I think it's the only metal album on my entire top 100 list, which is kind of my bad because I don't like listen to a lot of metal, but this is my favorite metal album ever made, bar none. I don't think anything's ever gonna touch it for me. I have loved this album for a very long time. A big portion of my life I have loved this album, and I have never stopped loving this album. Number 9 is Turn on the Bright Lights by Interpol. This album was really important for me to get into listening to like slightly more strange rock music. It's not a very strange album, it's very accessible, but it's super dark and atmospheric and just very urban, and it just sounds so good, and it is aged so incredibly, and it's just perfect. It's perfection. Number 8 is The Dreaming by Kate Bush. Once again, songwriting. Shout out songwriting. The songwriting on this album, how did she do it? I do not know. There is like no other album that really sounds like this that I know of, and I can't imagine that any other album that tries to do what this album is doing is gonna do it as well. The Dreaming, perfect. Number 7 is A Promise by Shushu. This is not, spoiler alert, the final mention of Shushu in this video, because they are my favorite band and they do have another spot coming up. But A Promise is one of the most sad and upsetting albums I think you could listen to. Every song is amazing and heartbreaking, and for the most part really noisy. All of it is worth it to listen to. Number 6 is Ants From Up There by Black Country New Road, another album that has been talked about endlessly on YouTube and music discussion sites, but it really is incredible to me. It is worth all of the praise to me. There's just moment after moment on this album just feels like utter catharsis, and that is the best and most succinct way I can describe the record as a whole. Number 5 is Souvlaki by Slowdive. This is one of the most, like, humid albums ever made, I feel. It just feels like a cloudy, humid summer day. Not, like, overwhelmingly hot, like, unpleasant, but just, like, it's humid. There's wetness. Number 4 is Soundtracks for the Blind by Swans. There is no other album that sounds like this, or that achieves the heights and the emotions and the atmosphere that this album does. It's 2.5 hours, and there's nothing you could cut from it. There is not a single second I would take off of this album that's already on it. Number 3 is Just Got Back from the Discomfort, We're Alright by The Brave Little Abacus. This is an album that I will stop listening to for weeks or months at a time, and then one day I'll listen to the opening track, Pile No Pile Pile, and then I have re-listened to the album at least once before I even know it. It feels like a giant hug. Number 2 is Loveless by My Bloody Valentine. This is like the shoegaze album. There's not any other album that sounds like this, and I know I've said that a lot for the past 10 albums, but really there is no album that sounds exactly like this. There's many albums that followed in its wake and that have attempted to do what it was doing. Many of them are great, but none of them touch this one or achieve the production palette and the sonic palette that this one does. It sounds crazy and also perfect. Number 1 is The Air Force by Shushu. This is basically Shushu taking everything from all of their previous work and distilling it into something that's a bit more accessible, maybe, but it's also the best sounding and the best written songs and the best songs ever. Just listen to this album. Listen to The Air Force by Shushu. This is the one that I really I can't describe. I also didn't describe In Rainbows, but I kind of just didn't want to. This album, to me, is indescribable, and I think maybe a lot of people won't really feel that way, even if you're a fan of Shushu. This being someone's favorite album of all time might be a little surprising to you, but I just the ways that this album makes me feel don't make sense, and I still need to figure out what is going on. I have not listened to any album more than this, and I don't know if I ever will. Who knows? Maybe. But not yet. I have to edit 22 minutes. But yeah, it's some new Nikki videos. Bye.